untouchable. 3 women draped in sequins, smiles dazzling under stage lights, voices harmonizing like heaven itself. To America, they were the dream. Beauty, grace, and soul polished into perfection by the Motown machine. But behind those gowns was a storm, rivalries sharpened by hunger, friendships corroded by ambition. A record label that lifted them into history and tore them apart when the spotlight shifted. The Supremes weren't just a girl group. They were the sound of a changing America. They sang of love and heartbreak while the civil rights movement raged outside concert halls. They smiled through segregation, performing for crowds where half the room still hated the color of their skin. They were icons, but also pawns, molded by Gordy's vision of crossover success, groomed not just to sing, but to survive. Most people know the glitter, 12 #1 hits, the glamour of television appearances, Diana Ross's rise into superstardom. But what about the fractures left behind? The silenced voices of Florence Ballard and Mary Wilson, the unrelenting pressure to be flawless, thin, marketable. The industry's cruel lesson: that talent could be erased if it didn't fit the story being sold. Why does this matter? Because the Supremes were more than music. They were a battleground of race, of gender, of power.
And for her to sit there and tell us what had happened to her almost was just too much to bear, you know.
Yeah.
And to see that.
Their story echoes in every girl group that followed, every artist asked to sacrifice identity for image, every black woman forced to navigate the razor edge between visibility and erasure.
It's happened later.
Yeah, that happened later.
Okay.
That happened after I got married. After I got them signed up in Motown and all that. That's when that started.
Tonight, we're telling the story Motown wanted buried. The rise, the heartbreak, the truth. Welcome to Echoes of Soul, where voices never fade, even when silenced. We uncover the untold struggles, the secret battles, and the raw truth behind the icons who gave soul its heartbeat. This is more than a channel. It's a sanctuary for those who feel every note, who know music heals and haunts, and who believe these stories deserve to be heard, fully and faithfully. So lean in. You're among believers who remember every harmony, every heartbreak, every cry from the stage. This is Echoes of Soul. The curtain drops. The voice carries on. Chapter 1. The Choir and the Chains. Detroit, 1959. The city was humming with factories and gospel choirs. On Sunday mornings, church pews shook with young voices, voices that carried dreams bigger than their neighborhoods, bigger than the poverty pressing in around them. Among those voices were 3 teenage girls, Diana Ross, Florence Ballard, and Mary Wilson. They called themselves the Primettes at first, just kids chasing the spark of music, harmonizing on street corners, performing at sock hops, desperate to be heard by anyone who might listen. The sound wasn't yet polished, but the hunger was undeniable. Florence carried the raw gospel thunder, Mary provided the warmth, the steady anchor. And Diana, with her piercing, almost fragile tone, had something Gordy would later recognize. The kind of voice that could slip past barriers, the kind white radio stations might play. But even in these early days, the chains were being forged. When Gordy's Motown empire began to rise, the girls saw it as salvation. Motown was the promised land. Sleek studios, professional songwriters, and a chance to escape the assembly lines their parents worked. Yet Motown wasn't just a label. It was a system. A factory that shaped young black artists into crossover stars. Clothes, hair, smiles, even the way they walked on stage. Nothing was left untouched. And the gospel roots that birthed their harmonies slowly stripped away, polished into something palatable. To cross over meant to compromise. For Florence, it was frustrating. She longed to sing lead, to let her big voice roar. But Gordy had other plans. He saw in Diana the marketable face, the voice that would bring the group into America's living rooms. Seeds of resentment took root, even as the dream glittered before them. They were still just girls, barely out of high school, rehearsing until their feet ached, praying for a hit. None of them knew then what it would cost. And so the choir became chained to a machine, harmony born in church halls, reshaped by the cold hands of commerce. The primettes would soon become the Supremes, and the price of that transformation would haunt them forever. Chapter 2. Polished for the dream. Motown wasn't just a label, it was a factory of dreams, designed with assembly line precision. Berry Gordy had worked in Detroit's auto plants, and he carried that same philosophy into music. Every artist would be molded, polished, perfected, then rolled out onto the showroom floor of American pop culture. For the Supremes, this transformation was both salvation and slow suffocation. Gone were the raw harmonies of the premiettes. In their place came carefully crafted choreography, gowns glittering like chandeliers, smiles rehearsed until they felt like masks. The finishing school of Motown, headed by etiquette coach Maxine Powell, drilled the girls on how to hold teacups, how to cross their legs, how to walk into a room as if royalty. It was more than music. It was reprogramming. To be accepted in a white America that still burned crosses on lawns, black performers had to be flawless, untouchable. No rough edges, no gospel wails that frightened white radio stations. Gordy's dream was crossover domination, and the Supremes would be his crown jewel. But while the gowns sparkled, the struggles behind the curtain grew heavier. They were nicknamed the no-hit Supremes in the early years, their first singles failing to make a dent in the charts. Each flop chipped away at their confidence, even as they rehearsed endlessly. Florence's patience frayed. Her powerful voice was caged behind Diana's delicate leads. Mary, ever loyal, tried to keep the peace, smoothing over cracks that were already forming. The turning point came in 1964. Holland Dozier Holland, Motown's golden songwriting team, handed the Supremes a song called Where Did Our Love Go? Diana took the lead. The track was deceptively simple, almost childlike, but it had that elusive magic Gordy always chased. It soared to #1. Then came Baby Love. Then Come See About Me. In one dizzying year, the Supremes became superstars. Television shows beckoned. Ed Sullivan introduced them to millions of American living rooms. 3 black women, dressed like queens, smiling as if the world had always welcomed them. For many, it was the first time they saw women of color not as maids or background singers, but as stars. But inside the group, the imbalance deepened. Diana's face now adorned the spotlight, while Florence and Mary faded into the background. What began as harmony was turning into hierarchy. Success had come, but at a cost. And as the gowns got brighter, the shadows behind them only grew darker. Chapter 3. Velvet shadows. On stage, they gleamed, sequins catching the light, smiles rehearsed into perfection, 3 voices flowing as one. To the audience, they were untouchable. But backstage, shadows crept in. Velvet shadows, soft at first, but heavy with envy, control, and betrayal. Florence Ballard had once been the soul of the group, the girl with the booming gospel thunder. In the early days, she was the one who gathered Diana and Mary, the one whose laughter filled rehearsal halls, whose confidence carried them through rejection. Yet now, under Motown's spotlight, Florence was being pushed to the edges. Diana Ross had become the chosen one. Berry Gordy's vision was clear. Diana's lighter, sharper tone would sell better to white audiences. Her face, framed by high cheekbones and wide, searching eyes, became the symbol of the Supremes. Gordy wanted crossover, and crossover demanded a single star. The Supremes were slowly being recast as Diana Ross and the Supremes. Florence fought it. She demanded her turn at lead vocals, her chance to roar the way she knew she could. But each time, Gordy shut the door. Her voice was too big, too raw, too black. In a world that only wanted a polished dream, the rejection cut deep. Mary Wilson, loyal and grounded, stood in the middle, torn between her love for both women and her need to keep the group together. She saw Florence's heartbreak, heard the bitterness in her voice as rehearsals grew colder. She also knew Gordy's affections for Diana were no secret. He was molding her not just into a star, But into his star, the strain grew unbearable. Florence, once radiant, began drinking heavily. Her laughter dulled. Her body, once full of energy, sagged under the weight of disappointment. The gown still fit, but her spirit did not. She was a ghost wrapped in glamour, forced to smile while her dream was stripped away piece by piece. And yet, on stage, they soared higher than ever. Stop! In the name of love, you can't hurry love. Song after song climbed the charts, each one a national anthem of heartbreak dressed in Motown gloss. America adored them. They became the first black female group to dominate pop music, transcending color lines even as racism still hunted them on tour buses and in segregated venues. But within the trio, harmony had become a fragile illusion. Florence felt erased. Diana felt entitled. Mary felt trapped. And in the velvet shadow, the seeds of collapse were already taking root, seeds that would soon tear apart the very fabric of Motown's golden dream. Chapter 4. The Crown and the Crucifix. By 1967, the Supremes were everywhere. Magazine covers, primetime TV, sold-out concerts, 12 #1 singles, more than the Beatles, more than Elvis in those years. They were the pride of Motown, the crown jewel in Gordy's empire. But crowns are heavy, and for the women wearing them, that weight was crushing. Behind the glamour, Florence Ballard was unraveling. The woman who had once anchored the group with her booming voice was being edged out completely. Gordy had officially renamed them Diana Ross and the Supremes. The insult was sharp, deliberate. Florence's dream, the group she had helped create, was being stolen from her, repackaged under someone else's name. Her drinking grew worse. At shows, she stumbled. Sometimes she didn't show at all. In one infamous concert, she arrived late, intoxicated, and defiantly lifted her skirt to mock the choreography. It wasn't just rebellion. It was pain made visible, a cry for dignity in an industry that had erased her. Mary Wilson, still loyal, watched helplessly. She had promised herself she'd never leave Florence behind, but even she couldn't fight the tide. Gordy's machine was ruthless, and Diana's rise was unstoppable. Gordy wasn't just a producer anymore. He was Diana's lover, her protector, her ladder to superstardom. And so, the crucifix fell on Florence. In July 1967, Gordy fired her. Just like that, the girl who had named the group, the one who had gathered the voices that would change the world, was gone. She was replaced by Cindy Birdsong, a former member of Patti LaBelle and the Bluebells. The betrayal was staggering. Florence wasn't just removed, she was erased from the narrative. Motown rewrote history in real time, presenting the trio as seamless, unbroken, as if Florence had never existed. Her voice silenced, her legacy stolen. Meanwhile, Diana Ross stood higher than ever. Gordy showered her with gowns, solos, and promises of a solo career beyond the Supremes. She became the chosen daughter of Motown, the symbol of its power and its reach. On stage, she was radiant, a star ascending. Off stage, her rise was a crucifix for the women she left behind. The Supremes were still topping charts, but the harmony had cracked. What the public saw was perfection. What the women lived was sacrifice. And as Diana's crown glittered brighter, Florence's fall grew darker. A fall that would soon become one of the most tragic tales in soul music history. Chapter 5. Exile of a Supreme. When Florence Ballard walked out of Motown's doors in 1967, she carried more than bitterness. She carried the weight of betrayal, of dreams dismantled. The name she had given life to, the Supremes, now marched on without her. The magazines, the television spots, the screaming fans. They belonged to Diana and the group that had erased her. For Florence, Exile wasn't just professional, it was spiritual. She had been the heart of the trio, the one with the voice closest to gospel fire. Now she was silenced, watching her sisters parade across stages without her. The humiliation was unbearable. She tried to go solo. Motown released her from her contract with little ceremony, and she signed briefly with ABC Records. But without Gordy's machine behind her, without the polished production and relentless promotion that had built the Supremes, her songs went unheard. One single, "It Doesn't Matter How I Say It, It's What I Say That Matters," flickered briefly, then vanished. The public had moved on, or worse, they were never given the chance to hear her at all. Money ran out. The glamorous gowns were pawned for rent. Depression deepened. Alcohol became both comfort and curse. Florence, once radiant on magazine covers, now struggled to raise her 3 daughters alone, cycling through welfare lines, her voice drowned in silence. Meanwhile, Diana Ross soared. Berry Gordy launched her as a solo act in 1970 with a hit remake of Ain't No Mountain High Enough. She starred in Lady Sings the Blues, portraying Billie Holiday. A role that seemed less like acting and more like prophecy. Diana was Hollywood's darling, Gordy's obsession, America's new black star. Mary Wilson, ever steady, remained in the reconfigured Supremes. She held on to the name, kept touring, recording. Even as the group's glow dimmed without Diana, Mary became the custodian of a legacy, though history would forever position her as the background voice in a story written by others. And Florence, she was reduced to whispers. The cruelest twist. Her very absence became the myth. To some, she was forgotten. To others, she was a ghost haunting every Supremes hit. A reminder that Motown's glory came at a human cost. In 1976, Florence died of heart failure at just 32 years old. Poverty-stricken, buried without the world's applause, her story ended in silence. But silence can be louder than sound. For fans who knew the truth, her death was a wound, a reminder of how easily brilliance could be erased when it no longer fit the narrative. The Supremes had conquered the world, but Florence Ballard's fall revealed the truth behind the glitter, that even legends can be discarded, left to vanish while the machine rolls on. Chapter 6. The Machine and the Mirage. Motown called itself Hitsville, USA, and it was. Inside that small Detroit house on West Grand Boulevard, Berry Gordy built an empire. He handpicked songwriters, choreographers, arrangers, and publicists, all working in lockstep to create a new kind of black stardom. Polished, marketable, safe enough for white America, yet rooted in the soul of the black church. The Supremes were Motown's ultimate proof of concept. 3 young women transformed into the most glamorous, most palatable girl group America had ever seen. They didn't just sing. They embodied Gordy's dream, that black music could dominate the mainstream without apology. But that dream came with chains. The women were under constant surveillance, their weight monitored, their smiles rehearsed, their words censored. Contracts gave Gordy complete control, leaving artists with little money despite million-dollar record sales. Every decision, from gowns to set lists, was dictated by the machine. And Diana Ross? She became both its greatest triumph and its greatest illusion. Gordy elevated her beyond the group, crafting her as a solo star whose voice and image could rival anyone in Hollywood. She was dazzling, magnetic, untouchable. The Mirage Motown needed to keep the empire afloat as the 1970s loomed. But mirages don't last forever. Behind closed doors, the pressure broke spirits. Florence Ballard's Exile was the clearest example. But she was not alone. Countless Motown artists, from Martha Reeves to Mary Wells, would testify that fame came at the expense of freedom. Motown gave them the world, then took it back in contracts and control. And as America shifted, so did the stakes. The late 60s were no longer about crossover smiles. The civil rights movement had grown more militant. Dr. King was gone. Cities burned with riots. And black pride no longer wanted assimilation. It demanded liberation. In that context, the Supremes' glamorous image began to feel outdated, a relic of an era when perfection was survival. Yet still, the machine pressed forward. Diana Ross was now a household name, moving into films, headlining solo tours. The Supremes continued with new lineups, but the magic was gone. What remained was a brand, profitable, but hollow. The Mirage was beautiful. It changed America's vision of black womanhood, cracked open doors for the artists who followed. But at its heart, it was built on sacrifice, on the silencing of Florence, the exhaustion of Mary, and the total reshaping of Diana into something Gordy could sell to the world. The Supremes had become more than music. They were a machine's masterpiece and its victims. Chapter 7. Echoes in the Ruins. By the 1970s, the Supremes were a fractured memory of their former glory. Diana Ross had left the group in 1970, stepping fully into her solo crown. The name remained. New members came. Hits trickled in. But the magic was gone. The Supremes had become a brand without its soul, a dynasty hollowed out. Florence Ballard, exiled and broken, was living her final quiet years in Detroit. Stories of her poverty trickled out, whispers of her struggles reaching die-hard fans who couldn't believe that a woman once adored on the Ed Sullivan Show was now fighting for survival. She performed sporadically, but her voice, that powerful gospel thunder, was muted by despair. When she died in 1976, just 32 years old, it wasn't front-page news. America had already moved on. Mary Wilson, however, refused to let the story be rewritten without her. She carried the Supremes' name long after Diana's departure, recording with Jean Terrell, Cindy Birdsong, and others, fighting to keep the harmonies alive. The hitters were smaller, but Mary's presence gave the group a heartbeat. She also became the keeper of truth, writing memoirs, speaking openly about Florence's erasure, about the pain behind the glamour. If Florence was the silenced voice, Mary was the witness who would not let her vanish completely. And Diana? She soared. Her solo career glittered with hits. Ain't No Mountain High Enough, Love Hangover, Upside Down, Hollywood roles, magazine covers, global tours. She became the embodiment of Motown's dream, a black woman as an international superstar. But her rise carried the weight of ghosts. For many fans, her name was forever entwined with Florence's fall, Mary's loyalty, and the cost of Motown's ambition. The echoes of the Supremes lingered in unexpected places. Hip-hop producers sampled their hits, weaving Motown harmonies into a new language of survival. R&B groups from En Vogue to Destiny's Child carried their blueprint. Three women, harmonized into power, yet always threatened by internal fracture. The story of the Supremes became not just history, but prophecy, repeated in every group that followed. Their ruins were not silent. The laughter of Florence, the steadiness of Mary, the ambition of Diana, they still reverberated through every note sung by the generations that came after. The Supremes were no longer together, but their echoes refused to die. And in those echoes, the truth lived on, louder than the machine that once tried to silence it. Chapter 8. The legacy of glamour and ghosts. What do we remember when we think of the Supremes? The gowns, the grace, the hits that still light up radios decades later. Baby Love, Stop, In the Name of Love, You Can't Hurry Love. Their songs are stitched into the fabric of American pop. But beneath that glamour lies the ghost of what was sacrificed to make it possible. Florence Ballard's story is the cautionary tale, the reminder that brilliance can be erased when it doesn't fit the industry's chosen narrative. She was the founder, the spark, the thunderous voice. And yet,